Well, let's begin. So, I like to improvise things for you, silly things, not so silly things. How do you want to do it today? Sometimes I've done like happy birthday in the style. We've done that a lot. Or one time we did I'm a little teapot in the style of somebody, remember? Or I just make something up from out of the blue. Or you give me random notes. Which way would you like to go about this today? Anybody? The improvisation.
Out of the blue.
Out of the blue. Okay. That's what I'll do.
And everything blue.
And everything blue. Okay, so we'll call the
Oh,
title
now that's good.
will
Color.
be Out of the Blue. Thank you. And what happens when you improvise, you know how they say you are what you eat? Well, in music, you are what you listen to and play. So I could like hear, oh yeah, there's a little bit of that and there's a little bit of that, something I listen to in the car. Vaughan Williams I've been listening to a lot of in the car. And so there was like a little, hint of that in there. Not on purpose, it just happened. So let me start with gospel. I like doing this mix, this half and half program, where we go back and forth, and I just see what we have here in this. Well, I'll play Just As I Am. I may have done it once before here. Just As I Am, the way I'm playing it is kind of inspired by the way Willie Nelson sings it. But here's the thing about this song, and this is the thing I forget, is the people who write these. Yeah, Charlotte Elliott, she was British, 1835. She wrote this while she was bedridden with depression.
Right.
And that was her prayer. Just as I am.
Yeah.
Take me just as I am. So, I mentioned Willie Nelson would sing this, but also especially George Beverly Shea sang it for the Billy Graham revival. So it's a beautiful hymn, and it's a short hymn.
Yeah.
And it's simple, but sometimes short and simple have so much depth to it. So, yeah, here is Just As I Am. A lot of books in here. Okay. classical piece. And just goes to show, I wish I could sing, but I can't really. And people will tell me, no, I'm sure you can, just try it. Every single one of the albums, they say, yeah, maybe just stick to the piano. So, but I'm going to play you a famous piece. This is something I learned not so long ago. I try to bring you something new each time. This is Ave Maria by Schubert, or as they call him down south, Sherbert, someone told me. But seriously, Schubert, this is Ave Maria, but it's arranged by Franz Liszt. So there's a lot of more notes than the original, and I'll explain how Liszt treats the music. But here's the thing about Ave Maria. What language is the text? Anybody?
Italian.
Is it Italian? Isn't it Latin? Good.
Yes.
But here's the thing. I had thought so. I thought it was either Italian or Latin.
Latin.
I think it's the Hail Mary
Yes,
prayer in Latin.
yes, that's right.
But I learned, when I just learned this piece, I looked up the history of it, and it turns out Schubert did not write it with that text in mind.
Oh.
He wrote it with a German text, an excerpt of Sir Walter Scott's poem, The Lady of the Lake. And it is a prayer to Mary, but it's a German translation of an excerpt of that poem. Well, I hadn't known that. So see, go out to dinner with your friends and bring that up and say, hey, did you know? Yeah. But really, I hadn't known that, because you normally hear it sung in, I think it's in Latin. And,
Yes, it is.
That's just become customary now, but it just goes to show that's not what he wrote it as. So this is one of Schubert's Lieder, L-I-E-D-E-R. Lied is song in German, for voice and piano. Sometimes Schubert would even write several in a single day. His dates were 1797 to 1828, and I'm not big on remembering dates, but think about that. He lived to be only 31. That's it. And he was very ill much of his life, and he knew that his time was limited. That's why he wrote so much. And I don't know, something about Schubert's music, it's the music of somebody who's close to death. It has this profundity to it, it has depth to it. Schubert is one of the absolute greatest composers. And unfortunately, though, he died penniless and unknown, completely. And Liszt, after his death, he came across somehow some of Schubert's Lieder, including this, and he was just blown away by it. Arranged some of these songs for piano solo. And in many ways, in doing that, Liszt, who was like the rock star of that time, just like Paganini, actually, Liszt modeled himself sort of on Paganini. But in many ways, Liszt is responsible for bringing Schubert's music to its popularity that he still has today. So, now, here's what happens. In a song like this, the form of a song is verses, right? And verses are pretty much the same music repeating,
Right.
but the words change. Well, Liszt, as an arranger, recognizes that might not be so interesting to just repeat it on the piano the same way. So the first verse is pretty much like the original song. But then here's another verse, and you tell me if this is Schubert, because all that business in the right hand, that ain't Schubert. That's Liszt, and you know. That's Liszt. He adds his curls and his thing. So here is the piece, Liszt's version of Schubert's Ave Maria. some Robert Schumann. That's Schubert, Schumann, well, different people. Schumann was born in 1810, and yeah, the first two I played for you before, but then there's a new one that I learned, and it's going to be a contrast to what you're going to hear first. So first, I'm playing by Schumann the last two of his Paganini studies. So we've worked through these pieces together over like half a year or even more. That's how long it's taken me to do this. 12 of these, and they're very tricky, oh my. And what happens is, there's a progression that Schumann begins. The first, 1 through 6 are close to the originals, Paganini's. And then the last, especially these last two, you don't hear Paganini, you hear Schumann. It's himself. He found his voice in the process of imitating Paganini. And so Schumann heard Paganini perform in the 1830s and was just blown away. Because how could you not be? He was think of like either Elvis or Jimi Hendrix or somebody like that. That's what Paganini was like at that time, early 1800s. He was a wild man. And all those guys in the powdered white wigs or whatever, they did not like Paganini. He was just even an insult to their worldview and their senses. So Paganini was like this, as Ivry Gitlis, the violinist, said, he was like the Big Bang in music. Nothing was the same after him. And so Schumann was so struck by him that he wanted to, emulate him. He wanted to play his music on the piano. And this is the urge to do arrangements. And I mostly play arrangements these days, and for a couple of years now. And I know the urge because it's the urge to do something other than be a pianist, like be a singer, but through the piano, or a violinist. And that's what I'm, living out those dreams by playing arrangements. In literature, the equivalent would be reading translations. And think of it that way. You don't have to learn Russian to read Tolstoy. You don't have to learn ancient Greek to read Homer, So thank goodness for translations in literature. And it's the same in music in a way. Like how often you hear Ave Maria played on solo piano, and that's the beauty of it. So here's the first of these studies, and Schumann, I've mentioned probably before, he had bipolar disorder. And in those days, they didn't have much of an understanding of it or treatment for it the way we do now. Not that we have a cure for it, but, and I think his music, sometimes you can sense that. And this first piece, what's notable to me is it's just relentless. It doesn't even breathe almost. It seems like breathless. It's like somebody talking very fast and manic, frankly. That's what my great-grandmother had bipolar disorder, and apparently when she was in a manic state, she would talk a lot. And the original piece is basically, for the violin, is basically what the right hand does. That's pretty much it. On the violin, it's a study for the bow. It's going, that's very similar to another piece of Paganini. Same technique, La Campanella, that one is. So this is the B minor Caprice by Paganini, but it's arranged by Schumann, and it's Schumann. To me, it's purely Schumann, even though Paganini is in the background somewhere. Now the next one is really, it has the depressive side and the manic side. It begins in a very sad manner, like, sounds to me like a sigh almost. I think on the violin it's something more like, just sort of like that. And Schumann makes it, he expands it kind of, he makes it more rich in a way. I'm not saying that it's better, it's just a different, take on it. In the middle, it's sort of manic, like the last piece, and it goes like this in the middle. That's very similar to some of Bach's harpsichord music. The two hands are playing melodies like two trains going at the same time, parallel. And here's the interesting thing. Bach, when he was alive, was not popular at all. Like Schubert, I mentioned, was. Bach was not even well known 50, 60 years after he died, but it was the Romantics who resurrected Bach's music. Mendelssohn first conducted the St. Matthew's Passion of Bach. And so, the Romantics were interesting because they were such forward-looking people, but they were also such backward-looking people in a way. For them, they so idolized Beethoven and Paganini and Schubert and Bach. And probably more, like, they were more into history or the past than past generations were. That's, when I was in music school, they said for Handel, take, for instance, the composer Handel. Last year's opera was not interesting. Didn't care. 10 years ago, even less interesting. They were concerned about the moment, and it's in the Romantics, they started to really be interested in history, looking backwards. Brahms was kind of almost a scholar of Renaissance music. So they were really, backward plus forward looking. But anyway, this is Schumann. This is the last of the Paganini studies, the E minor one. And it's these two moods. It begins and ends in a depressive manner, and in the middle, it's manic. And there's a guy named Richard Cogan. He's a concert pianist and a psychologist or psychiatrist. He does both. I don't know how you do both. And he gives these presentations / performances on Schumann and explains from a clinical perspective what's going on in the music. It's fascinating. I can't do that, but interesting. Here it is. there. This F sharp. That's a little. So when you have like sub-zero temperatures and then you have summer, all of a sudden pianos go out of tune. So now I'm going to play you a very short piece from later in Schumann's life. That's young Schumann. And the Paganini studies were like a springboard for him. And then he just started writing all his major piano cycles right after that. He said he wrote in a white heat at this time. This was a big manic phase he was in the 1830s. And then he was also trying to date Clara Wieck, this great pianist, composer herself. Her father didn't allow it. And then finally they got married, became Clara Schumann, you know. And he was very happy in marriage. And even the music he wrote changed when he got married and had kids. He wrote mainly song cycles. I'll play you one of them. There's Liszt arranged some of them also. He wrote orchestral music. So he shifted his focus a bit away from solo piano in that time. But in his later years, a couple things happened. One was I mentioned maybe before, he was a very good father and a very good husband. And you don't hear that about a lot of classical musicians. For instance, you know, Wagner was not. He was always cheating on his way. Not a good person. So, but Schumann, he wrote childhood-themed music a lot in his later years. And this is from a set of pieces called Music for Children, Young and Old. And because we're all kind of children in a way, you know, we never really outgrow something of childhood, I think. And what happened, so in his later years, unfortunately, he started to hear voices, you know, untreated mental condition. He would hear, he may have had lead poisoning, they said. The note A was ringing in his ears. Actually, most of his late music is in the key of A minor or A major. Piano concerto. It's all A. It's just like there. And another thing in some of his music, like this one I'm going to play, it's extremely calm. There's no tension. There's no, like the last pieces, there's a lot going on there. And it's almost too calm. And not long after this, he tried to jump in the Rhine River in the middle of winter. He was rescued by some fishermen and was institutionalized and died not long after that at the age of 47. But I was thinking about this piece it's so beautiful, but it's eerie because it's too calm. I have a friend who's over 100 years old, and he served in Iwo Jima. And I saw him around Christmas, and he was under the weather. He told me, he said, I'm not feeling good. I'm over 100, you know. And I was so sad. I thought, man, I really, you know. And then I saw him like 2 weeks ago, and he was really upbeat. And I said, how are you doing? It's great to see you. And you know. And he said, yeah, I feel way better. Do you know why? I said, why? Because I got into 3 arguments with people today. And conflict makes you wake up a little bit. And I feel great. I said, okay, so... And this music that you're going to hear now, it just doesn't have any of that. It's too... Like the piece Schumann wrote, which I probably will never play, it's called Ghost Variations. He was writing it, in the middle of writing it, he jumped in the Rhine River. That piece, it's not tortured at all. It's not, there's no suffering in it. It's just perfectly serene. Very, very strange. So, but here's the piece, Abendlied, Evening Song by Robert Schumann.
One.
And I was playing, not that piece, but when I was about 13 or 14, I was playing this another piece by Schumann from the Kindersingen, Traumerei, famous piece. This piece. It's a similar mood to the last one. I was playing it with 14-year-old angst, and I was playing for this Russian guy, a friend of my mom's, who was a cellist, and a taxi cab door in Moscow slammed on his hand. So he became a recording artist and recorded all the, like David Oistrakh, Sviatoslav Richter, Emil Gillis. He knew them. He played cards with them, he said. And I was playing for him, and he was kind of intimidating, I have to admit. Like, he was not, a very like positive person about. He's Russian. My mother's Russian. Yes. And I remember playing that for him, and he said, "No, you don't get it." He said, "This music, it's watercolors. That's it. It's just the Schumann when he's like that. It's just watercolors. Don't do more than that." So I always remember that. Now, gospel. I'm going to play "Life is Like a Mountain Railroad."
Yes, sir.
So my dad is an immigrant too from Southern Virginia. I always say that. By M.E. Abbey and Charles D. Tillman,
Yeah.
1890. A lot of these are old.
Yeah.
The lyrics, it's that life is
like
it's
a
the metaphor. Yeah, it's the metaphor of a mountain railroad journey to life. And this is a bluegrass song too. I'm going to play it kind of in a different way, a little bit of maybe Jerry Lee Lewis, Mickey Gilley, Jimmy Swaggart even in there.
The one line in there that's very good is,
Which one?
keep your hand on the throttle and your eye on the rail.
That's right.
Yeah.
I want to tell that to some people who are driving on the roads.
Yeah.
Yeah. There we go. Yeah, the words of those old gospel songs, they're just
very good.
They're poetic, they're beautiful.
It is.
I don't know, I'm not trying to say that there's nothing new that's good. I'm sure there is somewhere. But to me, some of the new gospel music is not the same. And I wish they would do these songs more in churches. But that's why I play them, because I want to keep them alive. So life is like a mountain railroad. Yeah, think about when was the last time they sang this at a church service? And probably the way I play it, there's not a lot of churches that would like to do it this way. So I would, if it was a Sunday morning, I would play it differently. music in New Jersey, right? But people sometimes will say, well, that's boogie woogie, or that's, well, where do you think it started, that kind of music? Where was it done first? Religious settings,
Of course.
for sure. So, where did all those musicians learn, from Aretha Franklin to, Elvis, whatever, where did they learn music?
In the church.
Yeah, so that's why they, even Willie Nelson, I mentioned, that's where he started singing, and listen to his gospel. His gospel is just unbelievable. So, now I'm going to play this piece. I think I've done it here once, only once. And this will be kind of the main course tonight. It's not that long, but it's longer. This is a piece, well, you may not like it, and you may not like me very much after I play it, but I've gotten comments, not here, but from people. But I give you this disclaimer. It is a modern 20th century piece. And it's got a lot of, it's got some very, spiky sounds in it. And this is like in visual art, you have Picasso, Jackson Pollock, all that. That's the musical equivalent of that. But I think explaining the story behind the piece, it'll make sense why it sounds this way. So Ludosławski was born in 1915 in Poland. He was an officer in the Polish army. The Polish army in 1939 collapsed. There were the Nazis on one side, the Soviets. His brother was killed, and he actually walked back to Warsaw. Just walked, and he got there. Now, had he been in the Warsaw Ghetto, if he had been Jewish, it would have been even worse. But nevertheless, being in Warsaw at that time was just not, it was very difficult. So to make ends meet, he would play concerts in bars. And in the daytime, he would play popular music. And he actually did mostly the two piano concerts with his fellow composer, Andrzej Panufnik, another Polish avant-garde composer at that time. But at night, in the middle of the night, they would do these illegal concerts of their own music. And that style I was telling you about, that avant-garde, that experimental, that's strictly illegal in totalitarian regimes. The Soviets later, they did not allow this kind of music. You've heard about Shostakovich. He would write something that was always a tad too dissonant, and he would have to write an apology to the government, and he was afraid for his life all the time. You know that Shostakovich would sleep in Stalin's times? And my late uncle went to Stalin's funeral. He was 13 years old. He crawled under trucks to avoid the stampedes of people in Moscow. And he said he saw Stalin's, and he said he was so small. He was pitifully small, this guy who did so much damage. He told me he saw Stalin, by the way, in the military parades, standing up there waving with his mustache. But anyway, back to the Soviets, Shostakovich would sleep right near the entrance of his apartment, because he didn't want, if the KGB came to take him to the Gulag, he didn't want his family to be woken up. That's the kind of life it was. And in turn, the Nazis too, they did not tolerate any music that was not exactly just so. And they were giving a concert of their pieces, probably this piece, and the SS walked in, and they put guns to their heads, and they said, "This is an illegal concert, and we will shoot you right here at the spot." Well, the bartender saved them. He came out and said, "These gentlemen, they work for me, don't mind the weird music. They've had a little too much to drink, I don't know." So, and the SS just walked away.
Wow.
And that's what it was, and that's when he wrote this piece. So how could you write something melodic, and it's got to be a little, like, here's part of it. You hear the militaristic feeling there. It's like I don't know. I played it somewhere, and someone said it's like, what's that thing, like a house of horrors, where someone's jumping out at you? It's creepy in that way. it has a sarcastic sense of humor. That's part of 20th century music to appreciate the humor there. It's not a laugh out loud, ha ha kind of humor, but it's like a wit, dry sarcasm. Prokofiev has that too. Shostakovich has it too. So, anyway, this is the Paganini variations of Ludoslavsky, and that's one more thing to add. That it's how he takes this old piece by Paganini, the 24th Caprice, and he turns it into something really different. So, this is Ludoslavsky's Paganini variation. I said, I warned you, it's very dissonant, it gets loud, you may not like it, but even if you don't like it, I love this quote. Here's a quote. Charles Ives, who's one of my favorite composers, and he wrote pretty experimental music. And this is not very, not PC and everything, because he lived in the early 20th century. And he would say, when people didn't like his dissonant music, he would say, "Open your ears like a man." So listen with your So yeah, that's what I'm saying. You know what he was trying to, what he meant. All right, but anyway, here is Ludoslavsky Paganini variations. You know, before the final gospel numbers I want to do, I want to play you a very, very short Claude Debussy song arrangement, Bonsoir. I don't sing in French, of course, but this is an arrangement by Daniel Ericourt, who I mentioned to you, I've become friends with his widow, with his wife, Jane. Daniel Ericourt was born in France and knew Debussy personally, but he spent most of his life in Greensboro, North Carolina, taught at UNCG, and this is one of his arrangements. I don't even think this is published. I got it from a stack of sheet music that Jane gave me. So, but I've always wanted to be able to play Bonsoir or sing it, but now I can sort of do that with the help of this arrangement. And this is not the 20th century, but Debussy was a 20th century composer. But it's very different from Luboslavsky because, of course, he lived before even the First World War. He actually lived into the First World War, died during it, but the music, 20th century music, the history of it, it started with so much color and experimentation, and then the two world wars happened, and the music became a lot more like what you just heard, reflecting what was going on. So this is Debussy before all of that happened. Now, I don't know if I did this last time. I love pop music, really, from about 90 years ago. No, there's good pop music today, too, some, but seriously, did I play Glenn Miller for you last time? I don't think I did. This is the music my mom grew up on in the Soviet Union because there was this illegal radio station called Voice of America.
Oh, yeah.
And the theme song of it, she would listen to it. And the theme song was Duke Ellington's Take the A Train.
Yeah.
So all that music I grew up with, when my mom and my late uncle, when they came to the U.S., they thought that that was the pop music of America in the 80s. Count Basie, Duke Ellington, Glenn Miller. Boy, were they shocked. But this is my arrangement of Moonlight Serenade by Glenn Miller. So, I love this music. So I was born the wrong time. Just a Little Talk with Jesus. That's a great old time gospel song. If you want to sing, I know you probably can't help it, and I support that. So I wish I could sing.
I grew up with that.
Thank you all. Have a great evening, and I'll see you later. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.